Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
Hoxby's on
Hi,
Hoxby's Plants,
guys.
everyone joining. Wonderful to see you as you're connecting here. If it's your first time, if it's your third time, please turn your video on as we go. Please stay on mute unless you want to ask a question. Then absolutely, please come off, and we'll call on you. We are absolutely insisting on video this week. Everyone's got the bandwidth these days. Come on, turn it on there. Van, Barbara, Sophie, Chris. Here we go. Great to see you guys. Great to see so many faces.
We won't judge you on your hair or what's going on in the background.
Yeah.
We love video on at Hoxby.
Brilliant. There's also a poll just while we wait for another minute or so for people to join. Talking about virtual events, virtual communities today. So when you join one like today, how engaged are you? Are you someone who loves them, actually, fully engaged, both ears, fully concentrating, or are you struggling to keep your attention? Are you multitasking? Are you actually just one ear in but completely mind elsewhere? And it's good to see that the majority of people are fully engaged. I suppose you wouldn't join if you weren't, maybe, but I'm sure there are some people who are probably not engaged, so they haven't actually perhaps even seen the poll yet. Maybe that's the problem. But when you do, those results hopefully come through. And let me just give a quick bit of intro before we introduce all the other people that we've got joining today. So we wrote this piece, this focus on, originally it was about virtual events, and we were getting lots of questions about how do you transition, a meeting that's in person or an event that's in person into a virtual world. We thought we've got some great tips around that, so we put a few of those in. But we also thought, as we're doing it, actually this doesn't just apply for just events. This can be for communities and companies. We actually believe at Hoxby that everyone in the future will work as part of a community rather than as part of a corporation. It's quite a bold belief, but it's something that we're going to try and convince you is the future and is even happening right now. So quick story before we get going is this is a DVD. I can't play it anymore. There's nothing in my house that allows me to actually watch The Great Gatsby, unfortunately. And even Netflix back at the start, when they were born, were a DVD subscription company. But the sort of digital revolution was that actually they didn't need to keep doing, if you like, the offline version, but just selling it online or sending it to people. The revolution came by doing things in a completely different way, right? So streaming, and now that applies across how we consume all content. So physical products became digital services, and we're all quite aware of that story. And we think is a similar story about how we work. So rather than translating the physical event and just doing a virtual event, think about it a more holistic, a broader way about how we build virtual communities. So that's our bit of background. And with us today to talk about some of the detail behind that, give us some proper examples, some practical tips to take away, are Andy Williams, who is
Hey guys.
our Director of Operations at Hoxby, who joined 3 years ago and looks younger by the day. There. And Ursula, who is our Managing Director of Creative at Hoxby. Fantastic.
Hi, everyone.
Well, thanks for joining us. Also, Hoxby veteran, as well as our founders, Alex and Lizzie. And guys, Alex and Lizzie, do you want to introduce a bit of Hoxby?
Yep,
Absolutely.
we'll do a quick bit of Hoxby chat. So for those of you who don't know Hoxby, we'll just give you a little bit of background. So Hoxby is a purpose-led organisation. We're actually a social enterprise. We exist in order to create a happier, more fulfilled society through a world of work without bias. No small objective, but we believe that the current pandemic might mean it's something we see realised within our lifetimes, which would be fantastic. We are pioneering that world of work ourselves in practice by delivering projects for some of the biggest clients in the world. So Unilever, AIA, Merck, Amazon, Warner Brothers, and various other household names. And so what we do is we create projects that we deliver through our 1,000-strong community who work entirely remotely across 43 countries, and they each work in their own work style. And we'll talk a bit about work style, but we think work style underpins everything. So essentially, we believe that flexible and remote working is the future, and not only is it great for individuals to fit their work around their lives rather than the other way around, it also produces genuinely brilliant and exciting work that is better than what can be achieved in an office 9 to 5. So,
well said. So we obviously, when coronavirus broke and it became clear that social distancing was going to be a key part of the solution, we decided to start a campaign called Remote Against Coronavirus, realizing that remote working was going to be central to life for the foreseeable, and also to our ability to deliver against that social distancing strategy. So we've been running for about, I think, 8 or 9 weeks now, this campaign activity, which started by gathering up all of the information from the remote working community behind the hashtag, and evolved into us creating a strategy that for kind of adopting remote working that sort of fitted alongside the UK government strategy of kind of contain, delay, research and mitigate in combating the virus itself. So trying to help businesses adapt as the circumstances changed is what we were focusing on, and we've subsequently created articles and now webinars around what we think are the kind of key subject areas that are going to be of most value to businesses right now. So remote leadership was the first, remote working being very different to working from home being the second, this being the third, and the importance of building communities in this way of working. And then we have another one next week around kind of looking forward to life after the crisis. So it's been a fascinating campaign. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed the content. We've really benefited from the input that everybody has given us, both in terms of contributing to content, but also asking really insightful questions in these webinars to help us evolve the thinking and share it more broadly.
I think, are we going to do a quick activity before we get started? So the rough scope of this is we have about 20 minutes where we'll make a few points, hopefully be as provocative as possible and give you something to take away, but also we want to answer your questions. So as we go, fire them in the chat, speak up, raise them to any of our panelists, and we'll absolutely pick them up and answer them as we go. But before we get started, Alex,
yes,
are you going to take us through this?
Yes, Victoria, any chance I can get permission to record? That's something you can enable. One of the things that we're trying to do is prove beyond reasonable doubt that this way of working can be the future. It certainly is the present for a lot of people, but there are certain things that people just say, God, you just have to be in the same room to do that. What we want to do is try and help people adjust their way of thinking to that, and to approach things with a new perspective. So we'd like to try something with you now. It's a very quick experiment with this group, but that we hope will evolve into something bigger. And that is that we'd like you to participate in the first, we believe the first, unofficial first ever virtual Mexican wave of appreciation for all of the key workers, the people who are working on the front line, both NHS and healthcare services around the world, but also in providing the kind of basic services that we all need and rely on in order to even do our bit of working from home. So what we're going to very quickly do is allocate you to a column. I don't know if
this is limbering up already.
if you can see, I'm going to basically tell you which column you're in, and then when you've got your column number, we'll do a quick test to make sure everybody's got the right column. Then we will go through across the columns from left to right in a Mexican wave. So the first column on the far left, column 1, is...
Does everyone need to have their video on, Alex?
Yeah, everyone needs to have their video on. We've got good numbers.
Coverage. Good
Incredible
coverage
numbers,
video.
in fact. Well done, everyone.
Sylvia, Emily,
great coverage.
Abby, Rosie, yeah. Great.
So I'm just going to make sure that my screen is as big as it can be. Okay, so column 1, Victoria, Lizzie Penny, Helen, Deborah Brown, Nicola. You are column 1.
Column 1.
Column 2, my team, Simon, Ibrahim, Barbara Wilson, and Amelie Terrell. Column 3, Ben, TJ, Rachel, Sophie and Laura Cook. Column 4, Andy Williams, Hilary Easter-Jones, Jessica Carter, Chris and Matt Mayer. Column 5, Ursula Capel-Helm. I have no idea how to pronounce your name.
Can you unmute and tell us?
Yeah, unmute and tell us your name, please, Ellie. Is it Ellie?
Ellie Stewart Barrett.
Ailey. That's the one.
Ellie, there you go. Sorry about that. That's my literacy. Fran, Melissa's iPad, and Adrian. Column 6. Hang on a sec. Let me just check we've got this right.
Feel free to practice your. Yeah.
You're giving us a demo, Lizzie, here.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to really overdo things on video to make sure that people can see it. Yeah.
I think what we'll say, so it gets a little bit confused after this because we haven't done this across 2 screens before, so the numbers have slightly excelled on that front. So I think what we'll do is, if you're anyone else, go for number 6. Okay. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
And just to confirm, the basic action of a Mexican wave is this. And that's what you need to do when you hear your number. Okay. So let's do a quick test, shall we? I'm going to shout the numbers, and you're gonna wave, right? After 3. 1, 2, 3. Column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, that was dreadful. Pay attention. We're going to do it one more time.
I think column 3, that was pretty good.
Yeah, it got good by column 3, 4. Right. Column 1, we're taking your lead. So in 3, 2, 1, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Everybody give a massive round of applause to yourselves.
You can do that, a virtual hand clap as well, if you really think.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that's true.
Down on the reactions there.
Yeah.
Keep those coming throughout as we go, guys. Always good to get a bit of feedback live as we're making points, because we're sometimes talking to a bit of.
The only 2 options are thumbs up and clap, though, right, Ben?
Yeah,
so it's going to be positive.
Keep those coming. Brilliant.
All good.
You could do, I suppose, an actual thumbs down if there's something.
True.
So, guys, let's move on. So, you've joined. You've given up some time. Ursula, could you start us off? What are some of the opportunities that open up with a virtual community?
Cool, thanks, Ben. I mean, I could fill up this whole session and the rest of the day probably talking about that, but I'm just going to pick on 3 things, which is crowdstorming, connections, and collaboration. So first of all, crowdstorming. One of the things I think is amazing about how we work at Hoxby is if we have a question or an issue or a problem or an opportunity or an idea, how quickly we can crowdstorm and galvanize a group of people and the power of the crowd. And that's exactly what happened with Remote Against the Coronavirus. There was an idea, we galvanized a group of people, and together that idea became something exciting and forward moving. So first of all, crowdstorming, and we use that on loads of our different projects, loads of working with clients. We can get massive diversity of people, thoughts, brains, opinions, points of view, etc. So that's really exciting, I think. The second thing is connections. I know we talked in the article about the events being a place where you can end up getting stuck in the corner with the wrong person, and that kind of doesn't happen in our virtual community. The way we are structured in Hoxby, actually, in the way in which we use our technology, it's really easy to navigate yourself to the right place. You can get to meet people really, really quickly and find where your place is in that conversation, whether you be wanting to talk about the challenges of parenting and homeschooling at the moment, or sharing your kind of hopes and fears in our water cooler, or being really focused on developing project ideas. It's really easy to find the right place to have a conversation, and so many people can have so many fantastic connections so quickly. And then thirdly, collaboration. One of the things I absolutely love about Hoxby is how we collaborate. And in a way, you have to be more, the technology allows us to kind of be more, we can collaborate on multiple things at the same time. But also we can, when we do get together in a call like this, we're much more kind of present, active, prepared, and there's a discipline around it because you've got this time together and you come with your thoughts. We don't just sort of drift through a day in and out of meetings in the same way. So actually when you come to it, then you've got people who are present and everybody's chosen to show up. So everybody's coming with enthusiasm and passion. And those collaborations really, really, for me, I mean, I'm working at the moment with AIA, and the collaboration we have across time zones, we've got members of the team in New Zealand, in Hong Kong. You can collaborate not only together in real time, but using the technology, you can collaborate in your own time, in your own work style. And because everything is open and transparent, we can easily build on each other's ideas. And that I find truly, truly exciting. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of those three things. Ben, I don't know if you want me to elaborate.
No, that's great. Guys, I'd ask everyone joining as well, if you recognize that, if there's some of the benefits you felt, or if there are challenges of attending sort of physical events that actually you're really not missing. What is it you hated about it? Please post this in the chat. If you've got questions for Ursula, please do. We'll pick them up as we go and direct them. But I'm going to keep us.
Can I just add one other thing,
please,
which is with my sort of MD of creative hat on. I think one of the things about a creative environment is allowing people and giving people the right environment to be able to show up and be their best creative self. And I think often in a real way, in an office environment, we don't provide that circumstance, we don't provide that culture, that environment. And I think what's really exciting is, in Hoxby, we have over 200 creative people who can choose to collaborate in a way that works best for them. So when they show up, they're their best creative self. And then that brings fantastic work in a way that you don't get otherwise. So just with that, my creative hat on, I wanted to share that.
Brilliant. No, that's really useful. Yeah.
I would add one more thing in terms of events versus communities as well, that I think that what events do is they bring a lot of experts together in one place at a particular time, and probably there are lots of connections and collaborations that could be made that can't be squeezed into that limited time frame. And where we think that communities are powerful, and particularly at the moment where events are transitioning to be hosted in terms of communities rather than just a very literal translation of that to be an online event. The great benefit of that is it's creating ongoing conversations and collaboration that will endure beyond when, say, a 2 or 3 day event would have ended. So instead, you're creating an ongoing conversation where you're grouping the right people together to collaborate on incredible outputs. So I think actually that could be not just a case of events can't be held because of the pandemic and they're being switched into a virtual event, but if you can make that something that is more of a conversation and many to many rather than just one to many, then it makes a huge difference.
Brilliant. Yeah. Great. So we've got some benefits to it. We've talked a bit in the article about purpose being really important, and it not just being an event that's designed to just for networking. It has to kind of have some higher purpose. So Alex, why is that purpose so important when we're building a virtual community?
Not just having purpose as well, having an authentic one. So I think in the way that businesses think of themselves now, purpose is very common. It's become something a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a trend. Simon Sinek popularized the theory with start with why, and there's a general appreciation for the power of purpose, but particularly in organizing communities. Purpose is the thing that can transcend geographical boundaries, and it can be the thing that bonds people in a deeper way than simply being in the same physical space ever could. It brings them together because they have a belief in something, and that they actually actively want to participate in that, in the realization of that purpose and in delivering it. So purpose for events could be really important, because I think there's a risk that an event perhaps hasn't necessarily needed that before, that higher purpose, that higher goal that communities really rely on. So when organizing an event, rather than thinking about what the event is, where it's hosted, and who's there and what it does. Think about why that event exists in the first place. What is it that everybody associated with that event wants to achieve together? What's the uniting goal of organizing this thing? And by defining that, you can really engage with people in a whole new way. And as Lizzie was just talking about, you can have a longer term conversation and almost more of a collaboration, a peer-to-peer exchange, rather than simply a kind of one-to-many exchange that you might get from a traditional event format. So Hoxby is an example. We have a purpose to create a happier, more fulfilled society through a world of work without bias. And Lizzie and I are pretty bored of hearing ourselves say it, it must be said, after 5 years. But the importance of saying it is that it unites everybody behind the common objective, and everybody knows that that's why we're here. That's everybody in Hoxby certainly knows that's why we're here and what we're all working towards. So I think you by having it and by articulating it regularly, you can serve to remind everybody that this is what we're all working towards, and that can be really unifying within a virtual environment. And I think what you end up with then is people opting in to be part of it, and much deeper levels of engagement than simply being at an event in a physical way. It's a much more emotional and much deeper connection.
So perhaps why we did our Mexican wave as well. Does that all kind of unify?
It's a great example. I could have said, let's all do a Mexican wave, and you might have laughed in my face, but I connected it to the coronavirus situation and the fact that we want to show our appreciation for everybody, the key workers who are helping to keep everything ticking over. That was the unifying purpose and the thing that ultimately made everybody feel comfortable to do a Mexican wave with each other, having never met before. So I think that's a great example, Ben, and yeah, exactly what we're talking about here.
Brilliant. And I'm going to move on to Lizzie and ask you now about, creating that culture within this virtual community. Give us some examples about how you do that. What tools are available to you?
I think what's interesting, and I think someone's just put something similar in the chat, that when you're organising an event, you think about the location, you think about the snacks, a lot of snacks, drink, food type, focus. But I think when you're focusing on, when you're making something virtual, I think it's all too easy to think, oh, well, we don't need to do all of those things. And instead we can just focus on the content. And I actually think that engagement is central to an event being successful or a community being successful when it's all remote and virtual, because these things just don't create themselves. Alex and I have been running Hoxby for the last 5 years, and I think for us it's been we sometimes talk about it as a big social experiment. Hoxby, 1,000 people in 43 countries, all working in their own work style. And what we've done is we've inadvertently built bits into the culture that to create this, what we call a familial culture. We want it to feel like a family, and we want it to feel fun. Love what you do is one of our values. And so we've been constantly building things into that in order to create that. And we think that that's something that whenever anyone is planning a virtual event or building a community in place of one, either of those things need some time taken to think about culture, and that investment does pay back, because that is a genuine business driver. It's not just a luxury. So we tend to group this into 4 different kind of areas: unique practices, model behaviors, own symbols, and shared beliefs. So I'll start with the last one, shared beliefs, which Alex just talked about just there. So at Hoxby, we always talk about creating a happier, more fulfilled society through a world of work without bias. I think I say that sometimes in my sleep. We've said it so many times, but we do say it so many times because that is why people are with us. That's why people support the work style movement. That's why they connect to what we're doing, whether it's clients or otherwise. And that impacts the culture of our relationship with clients, the culture within the community, us all being aligned behind this one particular vision. So then unique practices. For us, I would say our most unique practice is work style. We talk about work style all the time. We always ask each other about work style. That is very particular to Hoxby. We invented the concept of work style. And whilst we're hearing it elsewhere outside of Hoxby, that is something that you won't go to other communities and find. And so people know you will find that, and they can trust Hoxby to respect that unique practice. So then the third thing, model behaviors. we talk about red and green behaviours in terms of sometimes you'll just see something happening around the community and you just think, that's not very Hoxby. And it's not necessarily something that's naughty or wrong. It just doesn't feel in the spirit of who we are or the sort of thing that Hoxby might do. And actually, we've created a small group called the Culture Carriers, who are people that we think perfectly illustrate green behaviours all the time. And they are helping us to reinforce the positive behaviours and try and make interventions or change processes or make it clearer so that we don't have as many red behaviours. And there was a great quote from Twitter in the original article from the head of product of Twitter about model behaviours in the article. If you haven't read it, it's definitely worth a read. And then the final one, own symbols, which we have loads of fun with at Hoxby. There were too many to think of to include all the examples here, but we talked about Hoxby Hero in one of the previous webinars, which is our kind of recognition scheme that we do once a week. And there's a little flying person with a cape who is our Hoxby Hero. So there are lots of those flying around with those. The Hoxby Refresher symbol is our logo. Refreshing work is what we're all about in every sense of the term. And the Hoxby Refresher symbol is used a lot within the Hoxby community, when particularly because we use Slack and therefore you can use emojis to comment on things. And the refresher symbol is used as a big compliment that way. And then just to pick one more, I was tempted to do the animated party parrot, which is a particular favourite of the Hoxby's. It's like a party parrot that's kind of doing this. But the one I'm going to pick is the fire bell, which is that at Hoxby, whenever we win a new piece of work, however large or small, we announce it in our boardroom channel and we use the fire bell emoji many times, and everyone responds to it with the fire bell emoji. And it creates, even though we're virtual, it creates this sense of collective success in the achievement of the community for having won that piece of work. And that we've had that since day one. Alex and I came up with it right at the start, and it's something that has carried on. And all of these things are things that Alex and I don't have anything to do with anymore. They're just part of the fabric of who we are, and they're the things that characterize and make the culture what it is. But I guess the point is you need to plan across these 4 areas. These things don't happen by themselves. Culture, if you don't create culture, it will create itself, and it will be unlikely to be in the way that you necessarily want it to be.
Brilliant.
Sorry, Ben, have I run over?
No, that's good. I'm keeping you to time, but I'm also asking everyone again, cultural kind of questions about how do they land? Sometimes does the parrot fall on completely deaf ears? Do you have your own favorite kind of cultural symbols that you can share with the community here? Brilliant. We'd kind of love to hear it. And before we get on to questions.
Sorry, Ben, I was just going to say, I think Tom Armitage is a fan of the parrot that Lizzie mentioned, which of course, some of these symbols do transcend cultures and are enjoyable wherever you are.
I think animated emojis and emojis full stop. I was saying to Alex last week, I write a line a day diary just at the end of each day. And I struggle to write it now because I can't use emojis. I've got to the point where we use emojis so much at Hoxby that I feel disempowered to articulate myself with using real words without being able to sling some emojis in. So for me, emojis are the answer.
And Tom was just asking, you mentioned green and red behaviours. So I just put you off on that before we go on to Andy.
Yes.
Have you got some examples of what are green and red behaviours at Hoxby?
Yeah, so with Hoxby, we basically want to make sure that we have 6 values. Our values are explicit. For anyone who hasn't joined the webinars before, one of the things we think is really important in a virtual community is you have to be explicit about what you're saying, because if you leave stuff to interpretation, people might not understand. And essentially our green values all align to those behaviours. So, our green behaviours align to those values. So for example, respect the work style is one of our values. So you might see someone saying, I need a call now. And you just don't say that at Hoxby. No one needs a call now. You know, it can be delivered asynchronously. That's how we work. That is a red behaviour. Whereas you might have someone else saying, I'll record a video and then perhaps you can set up a Google Doc that we can collaborate on. That's a green behaviour. And so really it's just making sure if you don't do something about those red behaviours, they gradually permeate the culture and start to become the norm. So what the culture carriers have been working with us on is identifying under each of those values, what are the red and green behaviours, and then us thinking about how can we make sure that are kind of always improving is one of our values as well, and we're always trying to actually design those out. So for us, it's as much about designing out the opportunity for those red behaviours to happen as it is about making interventions. Because if you could have the right systems and processes in place that mean that that doesn't even happen, then all the better.
Great. That answer your question, Tom? Yeah, thumbs up there. Brilliant. Fantastic. So we're going to move on to Andy, then I want lots more questions coming through. But Andy, we've just talked quite a lot about people and people's behaviours. What about the other elements we need to consider? We need to consider some structure a bit more, don't we?
Yeah, the cool stuff that everyone likes. There is also, just to let you know, there is also a Christmas parrot who has a little hat on him. And he gets a short time frame to use him, but he's a pretty good emoji to get. I think it was overused, I think, around Christmas. So on the structure piece, there are kind of 4 things to be greedy to talk about, 4 things to consider. And the main thing is about the tech. So make sure that when you're looking at your tech that it links to values, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Matchmaking. So I think you need to understand in any event networking place why people are coming. Why would people want to come, and how do you get people together? So we've all talked a little bit about in the message, in the chat, about like meeting the right people. What rules should you enforce, if you should enforce any, or reinforce, so the behavior, link back to behaviors, and then what tools and services you need to kind of help with the community. So the first part is the tech stuff. So tech, these are some kind of buzzwords. Tech is seen as an enabler, but it can be massively transformative to the business. So in what you're doing. So we in Hoxby, we use Slack, which you probably know about, but what we use our tech for is it helps our attitudes and behaviors that we want people to display. So we've talked about some of the stuff like model behaviors and stuff like that. You need to choose some tech that supports you, that matches your values. And also linked to this is, don't try and build something. Don't try and create something. Test something out, see how it works, low cost, get it up and running. Don't try it across all of your events and everything. Just try and test and learn. And as Alex and Lizzie always say to me is, we are living life in beta, because we're always improving. So, and it's a good mantra to have, right? Because you can always learn from what you're doing. The second thing is linked to this is matchmaking. So as we've said in that little chat there, like you get stuck in a corner with someone, or you want to go to an event to meet someone or find someone, we can actually make it a lot easier in virtual conferencing and networking. But the power really comes is when you match data to this. So for example, people that do it well are Amazon or LinkedIn, where they recommend things. There's kind of like referring stuff. So if you're offering some learning platform, or you're getting people to network, how do you connect them with other people? How do you connect them with their peers? What resources can you provide after it to keep those conversations going? Things that we use in Hoxby to matchmakers I love Christmas time. So the parrot comes out. We have a Secret Santa, a global Secret Santa. We use Elfster, which is a free app which we connect people together. We use things like Donut in Slack to pair people together, and then we use channels to kind of match people with similar interests. So right now, interest parenting is red hot. Everyone's talking about how they homeschool or just generally survive and stuff. So and then quickly on to rules. So the main 2 rules I would say, and we talked about this before, is trust and transparency. So over 1,000 Hoxbys in 43 countries, we have to trust them. If we were to micromanage them and kind of mollycoddle them and really check on them, we wouldn't get anything done. So linked to that, we don't have a rigid hierarchy. So you don't need approvers, managers, owners, community in that sort of way. It needs to be facilitated by the community, and that's one of the key things. The other parts of that is transparency. So over communicate, share documents, make sure there are no dark corners in your community or event. So there's no secret sort of passageway. Everyone can access everyone. And then finally, onto the tools. We look at this in 2 levels. So tools are things which people can self-serve with. So things that you can do, or the community members can do themselves. So if you think about on your phone, things like filters on Instagram, they're really simple to do. tools should be something which are easy to manage and people just get intuitively. And then services are the real value add. So services are things like how you can help people. So whether this is access to experts, or whether this is kind of just helping people with payment and stuff like that, these are the things that you need to push. And then there's like a little bit of a nirvana in the middle. So if you can create services which are managed by the community, it reduces your costs from a practical point of view, but also gets people engaged. So a thing we put recently is Hoxby's Wellbeing Week. So hopefully some of you joined it, but this was curated by the community. So the content, we then provided the service through Hoxby, but we were able to kind of bring lots of people in, and we created a really kind of something that we wouldn't have done if we managed it internally through a team sitting in a meeting, brainstorming it. So we kind of expanded it out.
Brilliant. And it kind of almost like goes almost full circle back to that crowdstorming point. I think we're almost making at the start about how bringing those people together really helps. So guys, there's been loads of chat in the messaging chat. Really enjoying that, but I'm going to start calling on people to ask questions.
I take us back to the Mexican wave. Can I just, we forgot to say that the point of the Mexican wave, because I forgot to say this in culture as well, the point of the Mexican wave was it had a clear purpose. We all knew that we were doing it because we believe in supporting the frontline staff. It creates a bit of culture. We all have that in common now. No one can take it away from us that we all did that Mexican wave together. And the tech was the thing that meant that we could all feel a part of it, and it actually worked functionally and worked brilliantly, hopefully, as you'll see when we share the video afterwards. So even small things like that example is a good example.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Can we go to Laura Cook's question? Because I think that's a really good one. Laura, did you just want to ask your question about accessibility? Because I think that's an important one for us to answer.
Yes, so I think I'm certainly in favour of, building digital communities. I think, so just a bit of background about what I'm doing is I'm building a community of businesses. It's called Work With Me. It's all about, our common goal is all about to build inclusive businesses for disabled people. So making sure that workplaces are accessible. So my question is around making sure that accessibility is considered at all times. So that could be like using emojis and things, but just having that clarity about what that emoji is actually standing for, so everyone knows. And things like, if you're using GIFs, are there, does it have alternative text? We call it alt text. And so for people who are visually impaired, and the alt text reads out to the picture is of. And then similarly, on a conversation like this, if you have someone with hearing loss, is there speech to text so they can read what people are saying, or are there interpreters available, etc.? So while I think, digital is more accessible, and certainly is my point of view as a disabled person, I'm benefiting from working at home a lot more. But there are still challenges around a digital community.
Absolutely, but really, really good point. And perhaps one, Alex, Lizzie, do you guys want to pick up just in terms of, it's definitely aligns with our Hoxby values as well. Right.
Alex, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can do. I think there's a broader point around, I think technology can evolve better in the interest of accessibility. There are things that can be done to improve it. But I also think this makes a point around considering your technology platform in the context of your audience, and thinking about events and communities as an audience. Who are they? What are they made up of? What's important to them? Therefore, what is the interface that they experience? And therefore, what is the best solution for that, and for what type of message or objective? So there isn't a single answer that works for every event or every business. But I think thinking about what the audience really needs to get out of it is really important. And how are they going to interface? What are they going to experience? And how can you make that as engaging and accessible as possible is something to think about in the design of it.
And the thing that I would add is that Hoxby as we said, our whole vision is around creating a world of work without bias. We fundamentally believe that moving to work style, where you're judged on your output rather than where and when you work, is the structural change that will be the great leveler. So our feeling is that flexible working is a tweak to an outdated system that is inherently biased, whereas work style is a radical shift that inherently leads to work without bias. But I think the point that you're making that's really important, Laura, is that that doesn't mean there isn't still a lot of scope for bias within it. And we have to make sure that we are, even within moving to this in theoretically much reduced bias way of working, there's still a lot of scope for bias within it. And also that making some tweaks. So for instance, if you make changes for autistic people, that will also help people with dyslexia. So there are some changes that you can make to impact one group that will inadvertently also help another group. So having this constant lens. And so at Hoxby, for instance, we will always use emojis with a written message. There will never be an emoji without writing the message in prose as well. And that's for accessibility in terms of diversity, but it's also just different people consume information in different ways. So we'll share a video, but we will also put a summary of the video in text. And that's because some people just don't like watching videos and some people love it. So I think it's about the full breadth of diversity and just taking that into account.
Brilliant. I'm going to field a couple more questions because I think some of them are related, but also help move us forward a little bit, just to cover over the next 20 minutes or so. Jessica Carter, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, yeah. I was just thinking, in face-to-face meetings that I've had in the past, I would be leading a team, and often the quieter, more introverted members of the team would not want to contribute in the meeting and would want to come up to me afterwards with a great idea that they would want to tell me personally. And, you know, despite much encouragement, they just don't want to say it out loud or risk, you know, any type of humiliation that they're afraid of in front of a group. So this feels much more equal in the sense that you're all in equal little squares in front of me and there isn't any sort of sense of hierarchy. And I don't mind speaking out, but I wonder if you are a quieter, more introverted personality type, do you feel comfortable talking in a virtual meeting? How do we encourage people to contribute?
Great question. Thanks. That's I
wondered if Ursula might have a good input on that, given you've run some quite big projects.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'd like to ask that question back to the whole community here right now. If there's anybody who could be brave enough, who might feel that they're like that, to step out for a moment and share their thoughts with us, it'd be really great to hear that. And also, this is a safe place, and we're all learning and growing together here. But just from a sort of leadership perspective, I think there's a shift in how we might lead in a conversation. If you are hosting and you know you've got people who are like that, it's about finding a way to invite them into the conversation in a way that feels right for them, either by providing that kind of feedback loop afterwards or encouraging them to say a few words in the communication, in the conversation. And I think for me, if I know I've got that kind of person in the room, or I sense that there might be a possibility I've got that in the virtual room, I will often set out some kind of some ground rules that Lizzie and Alex were talking about, the importance of setting the culture of that conversation at the beginning to help make people feel at ease and know that there's no such thing as a bad idea and that everyone's contribution is equal and welcome, whatever that might be. So there are just a couple of thoughts there, but I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks about that, if there's anyone here that would describe himself as that.
So perhaps let's please keep posting those things in the chat. I think it's really great. I think it's also,
I think Nicola's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think it's actually really good for sort of self-confessed introverts, of which I tend to be one, in really big in-your-face events, whereas I think things like this, it's much easier, like you say, Ursula, to be on the same level as everyone else, and there is no hierarchy. So there's the combination of being able to speak up in this, but also having sort of chat functions. So if you feel like you've got something to say, but actually you don't necessarily want to like really vocalize that in speech, you can put it into the chat function, is really useful.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Because you can spend more time crafting what you're actually going to say as well, can't you? You can really kind of think about it, so you actually end up being a bit more open sometimes by I
think we've definitely seen that at Hoxby. If you separate yourself from this forum and take yourself into a community, an online community where the majority of the conversation is written word and takes place asynchronously, it's actually another level easier for a more introverted personality type to convey their opinion in a really compelling way, which I think also helps. It's that taking away that pressure of the moment, I think, is important.
I think that's what quite a few people are saying in the chat as well about, I think, an extension of what Alex is saying, that basically being able to consume that information, sharing things in advance and collaborating through things like Google Suite means that people can collaborate in the way that best suits them. And one of the things that we're constantly trying to do, and we talk about decorporification when we're trying to get people to forget everything they've learned in terms of corporate behaviours, is don't jump on a call. Don't automatically go to a call. That's not only not necessarily the most productive way to work, but it also might not be playing to everyone's particular preferences of how they work best. So being able to collaborate in multiple ways, but the right media for that particular time can be hugely beneficial.
Brilliant. We've got another common theme coming up in some of the questions here is around how do you encourage this change in behavior, whether it's changing from audio to making sure it's video, or away from face-to-face meetings to be more comfortable with using Zoom or video calls. Particularly Ailey is asking about engagement with, is it new partners and government partners, perhaps people who are more traditional?
Yeah, I think the first part of that question is about culture. And I think that the reality and the practical side of culture setting is about people role modeling the good behaviours. So part of what we've done with our culture carriers is not only look at what is red and green behaviour, we've asked them to make sure that they are constantly doing those green behaviours for people to see. And I think things like, it's a mixture of carrot and stick. Alex and I always have our video on calls, but we will also insist that whoever's on a call with us also has their video on. And sometimes that's a little bit awkward to do that. And we do it with clients as well, because to the second part of your question, I think the clients we love working with the most are the ones that share our values and the ones that embrace what we're doing, why we're different, and are happy to either adopt the same kind of technology or will use their equivalent of it. But the main thing is they use it with the same spirit as we do. They have their video on, they'll communicate in the same way that we do. They're happy to collaborate as we go rather than necessarily expect a kind of big reveal that may or may not be right. So I think being transparent about that and also having the reflection to understand what is your purpose and what are your values and how do they manifest in all the different touch points is really important.
I think from coming from I would call a super corporate background to kind of wearing what I like to work and kind of working when I want to the work style stuff, I think it's a kind of a fear of why wouldn't you do it? And it seems bonkers why you wouldn't do it, because you're having a conversation with someone. And I think one of the comments someone's put in the chat is like, how do you know if anyone's listening to when you're presenting to them on a call? Because we've all had that. Well, we've done everyone's on mute and you've presented for 40 minutes and no one said anything. They could be doing whatever. So I think it's more of like just seeing why people don't trust to do it and just keep going and always have, even if you have your video on, just kind of make sure that you just keep pushing it and it changes and it's not that difficult. Like,
or pick people and ask questions. That helps.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pick someone random with their video off and ask them a question, and you'll find out where they are.
We'll do that in a second.
Chris, are you wearing cycling shorts?
We've got a few short wearers today. Can I have anyone stand up with their
Swimming
shorts?
How many people here
Chris,
are wearing? How many people are wearing
see.
slippers? How many people are wearing slippers? Victoria and I. Don't tell me whether. Yeah, Chris, Melissa,
Crocs, which is
Nicola.
embarrassing.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, love Crocs.
Yeah. Shorts and pajamas.
Bare feet,
Probably
nice. Yeah, exactly. It's brilliant though. I think it's awesome that you just need to decide. You have half the decision.
It's amazing, isn't it, how more comfortable people are with this sort of conversation now than they would have been. You know, if this was pre-outbreak, I expect most people would have would have been way more, against that idea. So I think it's great that we're kind of lowering our inhibitions about this kind of conversation. It's a very healthy and authentic way to engage with each other now, which is really powerful.
I think it's sorry,
Ursula.
I was just going to say, I think what's really interesting is although we can't, I think the whole idea of social distancing is the wrong word. We're socially closer, but physically distant. I think, isn't it lovely to see people bringing their dogs to this conversation or their children in the background? We're bringing our whole selves, our humanness. And that for me massively increases the engagement. You're not bringing the slither of corporate self, you're bringing your whole self to what you're doing and your whole passion.
Yeah. Van, Amy, Rachel, does that, any follow-ups to that? Any challenges? Is that useful? Quick sort of thumbs up. Please feel free to come off mute and ask if you've got any follow-up questions. Yeah,
I think just following up from that. So some of the clients who would see a digital meeting almost like a filler, like we'll have a quick digital call just to kick off the meeting, but then we really want to have a face-to-face because we feel like that's more valuable. So it's how do you change the perceptions of those clients and change their mindsets to show that you can still get the same value out of the digital meeting as you can sitting across the table.
I think
you have to work harder. Like, I think you have to do a Mexican wave is a reality. Like, maybe not a Mexican wave. I think you have to work harder currently to prove, because people naturally think face-to-face is better. And I think that's something that we're always trying to do, is live our belief system and our model, which believes that people should be able to work where and when they choose, which means not going to physically meet someone.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Andy? Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, like, I have like pitched to clients in different countries and never met them, and one business and asked them for a lot of money, but done it on a conference call and built up a rapport and done all those things. So I think to Lizzie's point is that when we find people that get us and work with us and like this way of working, it's really easy. I think the challenge is where you have people that don't like this way of working and really shut the barriers down and don't want to do it. And that's probably an individual basis, and you might not be able to overcome those people just because of that's their mindset. But actually it works. You can conduct business. You don't have to see people. We are virtual. We say to people, we're not coming to see you. We want to do it over a G Meet and have those conversations. So it's, And
I think producing to the point that Andy's making, producing great work is the ultimate confidence boost for people that this can be the best way to operate. And if we do a virtual pitch for a piece of work, and the work that we are pitching is significantly better than two other agencies that might be in the room, then that, I think, speaks volumes. So I think that it's a good, holding ourselves to account on output is really important, because we have to currently work harder to prove that it works. But, we shouldn't have to, but we do. And I think that makes a big difference.
I'm going to move this on. We're going to have one or two more questions before we finish. Simon, you were putting in the chat about liberating structures. Could you come off mute and ask your question to the gang here?
Not so much a question, but just wondering whether you'd come across those as a way to design interaction in large groups. It's to help design participation, make sure that all voices are heard, that ideas bubble up to the surface and so on. So there's a whole catalogue of these things. I haven't got as much into them as I would like to, but they look extremely useful for events where you want participation.
Great, interesting. I don't know, Andy, is that a question for you, or Simon? You could give us a bit more background about what those things are.
That's.
So, for example, there's a very simple one called 1, 2, 4 all, where you invite everyone to reflect for 1 minute, then get into pairs, which you can do with breakout rooms, or more self-organizing platforms exist as well. And then into fours, and each four comes up with 1 or 2 points that go to the whole group. And so that way your introverts are included, you get a variety of different perceptions without groupthink and so on. And there's like a few done of them.
Yeah, I run a lot of innovation workshops. They're brilliant, like lots of different, the whole toolkit of kind of methods, from design thinking background, from breakthrough thinking. There's all sorts of tools out there, I think, that are great, that I've certainly used in the past. Andy, anything to kind of build on that?
Yeah, I've just clicked on the link now. It looks fascinating. I think I've not heard of it, but I think that again, I think it's sort of trial and error with any of these things. So I think virtually sometimes these work and then sometimes they don't. So I think it's kind of a bit of a test and learn, but I think simple things that people can get quite easily and doesn't need a lot of explaining is probably the way forward. So simplicity is the key. But yeah, I think this is a great share, and I'll have a look after this call. And yeah.
I think that goes to. Were you going to talk about Tom Armitage? Because I was. I think that comment you've made, Tom, about your friend's son talking about simple language is really important. And I'm conscious we've used the word asynchronous a couple of times, but hopefully not too much other jargon. We always pride ourselves on using no acronyms, being straight talking, and I think that is something that having more young people around us at the moment is holding us to good account on, but is also really important for accessibility and everyone feeling like they can contribute, because there's nothing like not understanding the jargon to make people feel like they can't speak up.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to build on something that Andy said, which is when you're sort of administering a community, you are a group, it's tempting to think that you can treat everyone in the same way and expect universal participation, when the reality is everybody's different and there will be different preferences for the way that those members engage with your community. Some people will prefer a forum like this, other people will prefer more of a conversation within a Slack environment. And I think you need to be mindful of the fact that you're never going to speak to everybody all at the same time necessarily, because people are going to consume information in different ways. So having a kind of breadth of ways of engaging the community is a really important approach to take from a tech stack perspective. Yeah.
I'm going to start to wrap things up with the kind of final takeaways. I just wanted to thank everyone's contributions in the channel. It's been amazing. Tim, would love to hear about a 7-hour webinar that you hosted for thousands of people around the world.
That's so cool.
Really like to hear about the challenges you guys faced in that and what you did. Simon, the blog that you're writing, I think that's great. Definitely share that back with us. We want to stay kind of really engaged. With that, all the other tips and things that I think people are sharing is actually really, really helpful. I'm going to ask people for like a 30-second takeaway here. I'm going to go for Ursula. Do you want to leave us with kind of one message there?
I would say it's all about flexibility. I've got my lifetime supply of rubber bands here, and I think it's about I've got as many rubber bands as there are ways to be flexible with this way of working. That'll be my key take-up.
Yeah, brilliant. Andy, for us.
I'm going to go for there should be no dark corners in a community, so be open and transparent.
Watch out for the stormtroopers.
Alex?
Incredible use of props, guys. So I think the most important thing is authentic purpose. So why is this? Does this event exist? Why does this community exist? My purpose is all about this, doing more of what makes you happy. So I guess that's my prop as well.
And Lizzie?
Mine is, I've got the biggest prop, which is the Hoxby refresher, which is our symbol. Of all of our symbols, this is the one that means the most. It's dynamic and it means a lot. And I think considering what your symbols are is within both your community and if you have a formal community, but also your personal symbols within the communities you exist in is really important, and make sure that you consider them and use them to good effect.
Brilliant. We'll follow up with all those guys. I'm really sorry for people who we've been posting questions and we haven't quite had time to kind of cover everything. Hopefully you found the last hour useful. We've got another webinar again next week. We want to come up with a different word for webinar, so if you've got an option for that, then please do suggest it. A webisode or something. I think that was Victoria's idea.
Get rid of the web. Get rid of the web.
Get rid of the web. Just, video chat. Guys, so that will be next Friday at the same time, and that's on as we're kind of moving out of the really strict lockdown, as countries and economies start to reopen. How do we make sure this isn't going back to all those business as usual practices? How is it evolving? How is it refreshing work? How are we actually able to think about different ways to work. So that will be next week. We'll have a couple more guests, speakers for you. We'll be sharing some more tools as well. So we've got a great tool on thinking about virtual communities that we'll be thinking about. Lots of questions to answer. So hopefully see you then. And also on our blog, there's lots more material and content, and please follow us on social media and get in touch. Really, if you've got questions, we're more than happy, anyone, to arrange one-to-one conversations to actually follow up and make sure you get the information you need. And finally, there is I think an exit poll here. How's this going? Is this useful for you guys? I noticed from the results of our first one, lots of people actually are very engaged in virtual events and virtual meetings, so that's fantastic. Maybe we've already got a bit of a self-selecting sample. But is this informative? Is this interesting? Tell us more of what you want to hear, and we'll produce less of what you don't. It's pretty much that simple. So thanks, guys. Thanks very much for joining. And hopefully see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Wait.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.